Right, we're live. So, okay. Hi guys, I'm Jo from JHLeather, and thank you very much for watching us in this 50,000 subscriber live stream special. So thank you very much to all of you who have watched my videos and who have subscribed to the channel. It really means a lot to me, and to be at 50,000 subscribers, it's a milestone that I didn't think I'd ever get to. So to actually be here is it's pretty amazing, really. So thank you very much for your support in all that. So in this video, it's like a bit of an informal live stream where we can get to chat a bit with each other a bit more. So I'm quite nervous about this, so I don't know you can see that or not, but yeah. So I did a bit of a test stream yesterday and it seemed to go alright, so hopefully today things are going to go smoothly, but if not, we'll come to that as the issues, if they do arise. So yeah, right. So it's a chance for you to realise this is why I do a voiceover on my videos and I don't do live commentary. So yeah, so what we're going to be doing is I'm actually going to be making a new lead for Skylar. So this is, let me unravel it, her current lead, and this is like 7.5 years old. I know you might not think it, but she is going to be 8 this year. Oh, hello, here she is. I don't know if you'll be able to see her. Let's say hello to Puppy. Hello, Puppy. On the live stream. What do you think? Hey? She doesn't like that I talk to the camera. I think that's why she's always so inquisitive. So if you see her in the videos, she is like, whoa, why are you talking to yourself, Mummy? What's going on? But yes, so Skylar is here and she is getting, there you go, sweetie, good girl, a new lead, because as I said, her one is 7.5 years old, and I have some blue leather and I'm thinking it's time she's had a nice blue lead. So we're going to make it with a padded handle, and the padding is going to be grey because I think the blue and the grey match nicely, and we're having a nickel plate buckle on it as well, so it's all hopefully going to match and be nice, I know. So right, we'll pop that to one side. I know it's exciting when I hold your lead, isn't it? Okay, so to start with, I'm just going to sharpen my knife just so it's not blunt, so no one can be like, oh, your knives are really blunt. They are, but not on the live stream. So, this is something I like to do. If I'm making anything in the workshop, I will generally just give my knife a quick strop just before I get going. It's always easier to make stuff if you've got a sharp knife. So, like that. Where's my strap? So I am using 3.5 to 4mm bridle butt for this. I like bridle butt, and I have a lot of it in the workshop, which is why I use it for all my collars and leads and my belts and stuff. You don't need to use a bridle butt. If you can get yourself a thick shoulder, that's absolutely fine for a dog lead. But I am using this bridle butt, and I'm actually making her lead 5/8 wide because I've got tiny hands. And if it's wider than that, it just feels a bit awkward. So I'm going to start by finding the best end. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. So you can have a look at the grain side, and this is very much in relation to a bridle butt, because you'll have a best end and a worst end on a bridle butt. On a shoulder, you don't necessarily have one, because the strongest part is going to be down the centre of the hide, just where the spine is. So we're going to start, and I can see already, I know what end I'm going to start from, because I don't know how well you can see this on the stream, but the fibres on this end are a lot looser, and you can sort of see that. Another way is to hold them so they're together, and you should be able to see the fibre structure. Again, in this side it's looser, and you can see the difference between the best side. And another test you can do is if you actually just roll the ends over and sort of give it a bit of a squeeze, then you can sort of feel one side will sort of not delaminate, but it'll be more fluffy, would be the non-technical term for that. So yes, so now we've got the best end, what I'm going to do is start by Oh no, I cleared my desk, there it is. And so I cleared my desk up and organised everything, but I don't remember where I put them all. So, right, we're just going to square this end. And then, you don't have to if you don't want to, but I like to cut an egg point on mine. And you can mark these out as well. And so hopefully, I'll do this right first time, but you never know. So, because I'm shaking. Oh. That's right. So I like to cut from the flesh side first, and then I will cut from the grain side. And it's more about moving the leather around the knife than it is the knife around the leather, if that makes sense. If you can hold your knife nice and still, you can have a bit more control over the strap. So if this is something you're new to doing, you can actually draw your rounded points on and just follow them with your knife, that's fine. Just I've been doing it a little while now, so I can, yeah, I'm just used to doing it that way really. So, right, I'm going to start on the clip end. So what we're going to do, I'm actually going to make this, flip it over to the flash side. I want my turn to be, or how do I want it to be? I'm going to do it 5 inches, and that's in total, so it's going to be 2.5 inch turn. So we're going to mark 5 inches on, and that's where we want our turn to finish. Oh, I knew there was something I forgot to get. Water. Hang on. Right. Got a bit from my test yesterday, because we're going to be like turning this over. We don't want the leather to crack, which it can do, so we're going to just gently start to fold it, and then if we wet the turn area, you don't need to soak it too much, just want to wet it enough that the sort of water soaks in, because else the leather can crack. And putting it in water doesn't harm the leather at all, so there we go, super. Oop. Don't want that to fall over. So that is going to be our clip turn. And now the overall length, Skylar's current one is 34 inches including the clip. And I quite like that length. So this one is going to be, whoops, the same length. And we will go down to 34. So I'm just going to hold that loosely there, and we're going to mark on now how long our handle is going to be. So I like to do the handles of mine 8 inches. That gives most hand sizes a good sort of amount of range through these. And so what I'm doing is I'm having my 8 inches is here, and then I'm just going to mark on the bit underneath and the bit on top, because we're going to need both. Oops, sorry, we can take the clip out. Let's unroll that, and we're going to mark all line across, and then we're going to add to this. So this is actually going to be the turn, or where the handle is stitched back onto the main lead. So I want this is going to be 2.5 inches, so that should match the turn at the other end. So we'll cut that off, and then I'm going to do another egg point on this end, and hopefully I'll do it first time, and then it won't be any shorter than it needs to be. So I'm going to do another egg point. I was worried that I was going to mess them up because it was live, but that's fine. So let's get one of those. Super. So edging. Now this one is having a padded handle, so I'm not going to be edging underneath where the handle is going to be. If you were making this so it didn't have any padding, you would want to make sure you edge under there as well. But we don't need to worry about that bit just now. Oh, one thing I'm going to do is actually just mark on where the turn is going to finish. So because I got these marks on the front, I can line them all up, flip the whole thing over, and then just draw around the end. And we'll use it as a guide later as well when we come to stitch mark the lead. So starting from the grain side, we're just going to number one edge all the way around. So at the moment we're just going to be going through whilst I'm making this. When we get to the stitching stage, I will be doing some sort of Q&A sessions. So if you do have questions, if you get them coming in, Tim is taking note of some for me so that we can get them answered for you. So we're going to have like about an hour or so of stitching. So that's when we can do our little Q&A session. And so for this bit on the underside, on the flesh side of the lead, I'm actually using a number 3 hollow edge shave. I really like this for this just one particular job. So if I'm ever making a collar or a lead or a belt, the flesh side, I will always use a number 3 hollow edge. So I got this one a while ago actually from a company called Joseph Dixon's, which unfortunately they've gone out of business now, but you can get these from sort of most tool companies. I know Abbey England have them if you are on the lookout for one. And the number 3 is the one that I like the most for sort of like dog collars and stuff like that. If you've been making smaller items, you would probably want a smaller one. But if you go too small, then you don't really get the effectiveness of the actual hollow edge bit, if that makes sense, because you're taking off such a tiny amount as it is anyway. Right, so that's our lead cut out. So what we're going to do is actually do some staining. So let's move this out of the way. And so I don't make too much of a mess, because I have been known to make a lot of mess. And so if you're one of our Patreon subscribers, you're one of the tiers, you get access to our exclusive Patreon only vlog. And you will see in the latest video on that, I made a huge mess and ended up having to paint most of this wall again, because I made the mistake of shaking my stain without the lid on properly, and oh my goodness, did it go everywhere. So I still got my trousers there. It was with edge paint as well, so it went everywhere and I haven't managed to get it out of anything. There's my stain. There we go. Right, so one question I did actually see a little while ago in the comments was where I get my coloured bridal leather from. So this I do actually get from Metropolitan Leather. They don't offer it on their website, but if you email them or call them, they do actually offer a colouring service, and I believe it's £30 or £35 extra on the bridal butt prices that they've got listed. And so I actually selected this one is their mid blue from their Lamport colour selection. So you can choose one of them, or you can actually get custom colours. So you might have seen, if you follow me on Instagram, it's just at JHLeather on Instagram, if you want to give me a follow. So you would see I got some bright pink, that's what I was saying. Yeah, so I got some bright pink leather from them, and that was actually colour matched. So what I did, I actually sent them in a paint swatch. You get like the paint charts at like hardware stores and that sort of thing. So I actually sent them just the one that I wanted, and they colour matched it and sent me the hide. And then just make sure, if you do go down that route, you ask for a bottle of sort of stain to go with it, and you'll get one that matches what they've actually coloured your hide with, so which is what I'm using here. So this is why my blue stain here matches the blue leather so well, because I've got both of them for Metropolitan when I ordered it. So if you are on the lookout for some coloured bridal butt, I highly recommend them. I believe Sedgwick's also do some colours. I think there are I think they do like a green, a red and a blue as well. I've not used them, but I mean Sedgwick's leather is very good, so that's also worth a look at if you don't want to go down the custom coloured route. But the thing is with the Sedgwick's one, you won't get any stain to match it, and you'll have to either make your own or purchase some separately. Yes, but this is a bit I hate doing staining. It takes so long to do. Skylar, this is the problem when we're at work. Any little noise and she's just like, nope, not happy. Going to bed now. I got a bed for her underneath my desk, so she's just gone there. So if you want... Oh, sorry. I've got Tim here who's helping me switch between cameras and ask questions and stuff, but I'm not very good at the old multitasking front, it seems. Right, so what I do when I'm staining, I generally, with this stuff, it's not an edge paint and it's not really like a proper edge stain. It is, yeah, it's like an in-between. So what I generally do is I'll put one coat on to start with and I will burnish it because I like doing it that way. And then I might put another coat on after, especially because with the padding on this one, I'm using a light grey. So I don't want to have to restain that afterwards. I want to get a good finish on this first time really, just so that I don't have to sort of go over it, because we don't want the leather to, on the padding, to absorb any of the stain, because you can't really get it out. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this little wood burnisher. I'm going to get these edges nice and shiny, and then I will probably put another coat on, which I will then just let absorb into the leather. So yeah, so I just had one question come through. Is the stain water-based? So my answer to this one is I am not totally sure, I'm afraid. So this is from, like I said, it's from Metropolitan Leather. I have got some of their water-based dyes and their oil-based dyes, and it's not the same as that. I'm not too sure how it's different, but it's like their water-based stains are like quite watery, as you might expect, being water-based, and this one is sort of like an in-between. The closest thing I can say, it smells, I mean it's probably not, but it does smell like acrylic paint, like what you would get at school, but I'm not totally sure what is in it. No gloves, no, I don't stain with gloves because this does wash off, so maybe it is water-based, I don't know. Having long hair has the effect of when you wash your hair in the shower, it washes your hands, so I don't need to worry too much. But no, I've never, I think that's sort of, I guess, maybe from my salary side, none of us ever put gloves on when we were staining. So if I was going to be doing, because I'm stitching this, I'm going to use the blue thread that's going to match it all. If I was stitching this in a light coloured thread, then I'd maybe think about it, or just get it to a point and then go and really scrub my hands clean so that you don't get any colour transfer from your hands onto the thread. But no, I never. Also, it doesn't help that I've got tiny hands, so trying to get sort of gloves my size is a bit awkward, so I don't mind. So, does dye help preserve leather? So it depends on what leather you're using. So with this is a finished hide, so the front and the back, so the grain and the flesh have been coloured. So if we left these edges without anything on them, then they would easily absorb water and sort of anything really that came into contact with it. With having either a stain put on it like this, or just any sort of edge sort of treatment really. So like I said, this is sort of an edge stain, so I'm going to put this on, and then I'm actually going to put a couple other things on as well, just to make sure it's good, because this is a dog lead. Like, you'll find this more if you're doing like dog equipment or horse equipment, anything that comes into contact with fur. You've got to add a little bit more to your edge treatment, just because the fur is going to rub the edges. So if like you just put stain on it, it has, especially if it comes into contact with water, so if it is on a dog or a horse and they're sort of swimming or it's raining, there will be, to start with, a little bit of sort of dye leaching out, just because the fur interferes with the edge of the leather. So going a bit off track here, but yeah, so having sort of an edge treatment will help it, because it's going to stop water getting into the leather. But also on top of that, I'm going to put a Tolkanol, which is going to make the edges nice and even shinier than what I'm hopefully going to get them now. And then I'm going to put on some acrylic resin, and the acrylic resin does add a waterproof layer of protection to it. It's really good, so I love using that, and I use it on all my dog collars, all my leads and all my belts, just because I really don't want any of this stain to accidentally leach out or anything. So, and that, it's the Phoebings one that I use, the Phoebings I think is how you pronounce it. I'm not very good at pronouncing the majority of things that come out of my mouth, so but I'm pretty sure it's that. I'll show you the bottle later on in the video when we get to that point. But I'm just going to finish doing this, and then it's going to be on with the Tolkanol. Just, I like that to give it a nice shiny finish. And then on to stitch marking. Oops. So, right, that's this sort of staining bit done. So, what we're going to do next, move that over here so it's out of the way. And we're going to use this Tolkanol. So, I like the clear one, this is the one that I am using. I think you can get it in black as well, if you are sort of doing a black item, you can use that. What? Hang on, I'm not very good at reading and doing stuff at the same time apparently. What do you do if dye doesn't take to the leather? I've not really experienced that firsthand. So all the leather that I buy is already coloured and it's already treated, just because I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can purchase hides rather than like a natural or a russet hide where I would then colour it myself. So I think, again, that's coming from the saddlery side, we always used sort of finished hides, so I don't really have much experience colouring something for myself. So unfortunately I don't think I'm the best person to answer that one, I'm afraid. I can probably find out if you want to email me your details, and I can see about getting some information for you on that. But yeah, that's not something that I've had any particular sort of first-hand experience in, I'm afraid. So what are we up to? Oh, 110 people. That's quite a lot. So when I was we were getting ready for it, it was a bit like, we don't know how many people are going to tune in live or anything like that. So it's a bit like, I did my test yesterday. I think we got up to 6 people just on my test one, and I was quite excited at that. So 108, that's pretty cool. So if you're just joining us, hello, welcome to the live stream. We are in the process of making little Skylar Bug a new lead. So we just put some Tolkanol on the edge. I'm just going to burnish that in. So if you haven't used Tolkanol before, I highly recommend it. It's so nice to use, and it's just the feel of it. It's just like, oh, nice and smooth. So especially when I first got it, it was like, oh, put it on a little bit, and it's like, oh look, you can feel the difference between this bit that has it and this bit that doesn't have it. Because I'm really cool. Alright, so once we've done this, what I'm going to do is get my creaser out, and I'm going to put a nice little crease edge on it. So the creaser that I use is a screw crease. So again, I think that is more of a saddlery sort of related tool, because from all the videos that I've watched on leather crafting, most people use like a fixed creaser, which is fine. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as you get the result that you're looking for. But I use the screw crease because you can adjust it to whatever size you like, which is handy. So rather than having loads of different ones, I just got the one. Right, let's turn this on. Okay, so another question is, have you had any problems getting leather during COVID and Brexit? So I've been quite fortunate. A lot of my suppliers are here in the UK anyway, and a lot of them were able to stay open during this coronavirus pandemic. So I didn't really have too much, I've not noticed too much trouble with leather. I have noticed a few issues getting buckles and stuff from a few different places, I think because like foundries and stuff have not been working at full capacity, and I think a lot of people have come into Leathercraft recently, and so I don't know if there's like extra demand for it. So that's fine. I don't usually get much in the way of stuff from outside of the UK. Hang on, let me just turn this off. So, and I haven't got anything recently from outside of the UK. So, other than like a time delay, I think the only difference is gonna be I think there's gonna be like an import duty on stuff. But like I said, I haven't ordered anything from outside of the UK since we've left Europe. But I can imagine it's gonna be delayed, and it is gonna put your sort of costs up a little bit, because you're gonna have to pay import tax on sort of items above a certain price, but I forget what it is. It's something like 136. It's like a really odd number from what I remember. That, I've just made that up. But we'll see. Is your padding from Metropolitan Leather? No. So the padding that I am using for this is actually, it's quite an old hide that I had from a company called Liprevo, and they're based in, where are they based? Newcastle, I think. here in the UK. So I'll be using that for this. But Metropolitan do a nappa hide that you can use, and they come in all sorts of colours. It's just, I've got this grey, and until it runs out I need to buy a new one. This is what I'm going to be using, so that's why we got that. So another company that I use, let me just turn this on because the crease is not hot enough. Another company that I use for padding leather is A&A Crackenson, and it is their Baby Buck Nappa range. So that's what I usually use for my padding, but like I said, I know many people have ordered this grey one, so I've still got the sheepskin nappa for this. But ideally you want anything about 0.8mm thick. If you can't get it, you can use thicker stuff, that's absolutely fine. You just need to take that into account when you're actually cutting your padding, because it's going to add more thickness to that than if you're using something that's 0.8mm thick. So you can use mostly chrome tan is what you'll be looking for, because it's a lot more, that's a bit hot, it's a lot more malleable because it's of the way it's made. Let's just do the rest of this crease now. Do you use a rag for wiping? So yes, for when I'm staining, I do actually use a staining cloth, and that's again just something that we've used, or I've used sort of since my training, and I prefer using the staining cloth because you can do both sides at the same time, and it's very effective, because I mean all you really need for shiny edges is friction. So it's just what sort of best method you have available to you to just give that friction. Don't know if that's the right term to use, but so it's just, yeah, it's about causing friction, because you want that heat, and it's going to be the heat that's going to make your edges all nice and shiny and smooth. So I think it's linen. This is Irish linen, I think, that I got from Abbey, England, but you can just use canvas. I've got, when I was at school, I made a light, and the surround for that was just plain bog standard canvas that I got from a haberdashery, and that works really well as well. And generally I find the more stain you have on it, the better the cloth. I'm not too sure what the scientific value is of that, but that is from my experience. Right, so I've done our staining. Let's just tidy this desk up a bit. Can you talk about the edger and heating it? What temperature? Okay, so you probably heard it in the background. I just use a portable hob to heat my creaser up, and I don't have like a technical way of actually deciding on how hot it is. Just sort of from experience, I can work out generally if it's been on there for too long or not. But the best thing to do if you're unsure is just use some scrap. So you'll see I did have some scrap here, and just have a test piece, just to make sure, because if it's too hot, it's going to melt and burn into your leather, because leather is skin at the end of the day. And if it's not hot enough, that's not the end of the world, because you can go over it again with it slightly hotter. If it's not hot enough, it's not going to be as permanent a finish or a crease line as if it was a little bit warmer. So, right, what are we doing? So we are on to, we'll do this end first. How much for enough leather to make, I say how much to make an axe hand cover, or the sheath that goes on the blade? Okay, so it depends on what the size of the axe would be as to how much leather and time it would take. So, I mean, if you've got just like a normal hand axe, something about £25, something around there, I would say, but it depends on what leather you're using, and how big the axe is really. if you've got a big old axe, it's going to take more leather and more time stitching, so it will cost more. So right, before I get distracted again and forget what I'm doing, so now doing the stitch marking. So what I've done is I've actually set my dividers, and I know I do this by eye usually, but they are about 1/8 of an inch. And the reason I have it at 1/8 of an inch is because my creasing iron I have set at 1/16 of an inch, so it's the same distance in again from the edge, so it sort of balances it all out. And when I'm doing the leads, what I like to do is, you would have seen, so I've just marked the very edge, this sort of point end, because I just need this point for this bit. Because what we're going to do is we're going to pop in our clip and we're going to fold this over, and then with just got a little awl here for this. This is my bridal making awl, which is the smallest one I got. So and we're just going to pierce this all the way through both layers. So we just got the little end coming out. I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not, but so we've got just the very end of the awl hanging out there. So what we're going to do, whilst this is all together, we want to squeeze it as tight as we can at the top, and that's going to be where our stitching is going to stop. It's going to be there. And then what I like to do, because I've got this turn on here, we're going to mark roughly where the sort of egg point starts to. So we've got 3 marks on here now, and so with our dividers, not our dividers, with our set square, we're just going to even the 2 up that are on the straight, and we're going to draw a line between them, and then I'm going to come back in a minute once I've done the other end, because we'll do the same down there, and we're going to even up that centre hole, and then we'll draw on a sort of little semicircle shape to get the sort of matching egg shape on to our stitching side. So flip this over, this is going to be the back on the handle side, and so remember I've got my marks that I put on earlier, and hold that all in place, and all goes through right at the very tip of that point, all the way through. And for this side we're just going to mark where that turn is, because we're basically going to stitch the padding in first and then stitch the turn down afterwards. It's a bit easier to do it that way. One other mark we just need to make, we're just going to transfer this 2.5 inch line, because that's where we're going to stop our stitch marking to, because at that point that's going to be under here, and this is going to have the stitch marks, and we're going to stitch mark from this side, or stitch from that side. So we've got these marks in, and just connect the dots up. What contact adhesive do we use? Okay, so there are a few different contact adhesives out there. The one I use and I absolutely love is Bostik 6092. So that's Bostik 6092, and it is it a rubber? I think it's a neoprene or a rubber adhesive. So it gets used a lot in like shoe manufacturing. Every time I've tried to order it, I've had to order it from a different place, because I'm not sure why, but I think it's quite hard to get hold of. So I buy it in 5 litre cans, but that's the one that I use the most, and I just love it because it's really strong. You can use other adhesives, like the Abbey ones will be fine to use. It's just sort of, I guess it's about trying to find one that you like, really, unfortunately, and then going from there. But yeah, so I use the Bostik 6092. So what I've done, so I've drawn my lines on, and I've now evened up with my dividers the centre hole where my awl came out, and what we're going to use is something round. So I've got a 2p. You can use whatever coin you think fits. I might use a 1p actually, that's a bit rounder, yeah. So we're going to go for a 1p coin and just draw that on. So it's nice and even. So, right, now we've got everything ready for stitch marking. So the stitch markers I use are the ones that I've got from Abby. So these are 3.38 millimeters, and it sort of works out from my other sort of ones that I have here. It's sort of a between a 6 and a 7 stitches per inch. I really like these, and I really like these pricking irons. So these are the more expensive options, and I think they have actually changed these now. So they are the standard sort of 8, 7, that sort of stitch, like stitches per inch sort of size. Should I just flip it to the other camera, love? You flip the camera. So as a size difference, so these are the sort of the premium, the more expensive sort of sized irons, and they come in a 2-pack. So these are 3.38. The ones that they do now are the old Joseph Dixon patterns. I believe they bought them, and so they are sort of a standard 7 stitch, so 8, 9, those sort of things. So a size comparison, because I did a video on them, and I've got small hands, so you can't really tell what the size difference is or when it's in my hands, because they're quite small. But this is one of the diamond set. So I have 2 of the diamond sets from Abby as well for other projects. So that is the size difference between them. So this is the diamond set, like I said, but the sort of the cheaper sort of oblique, I think it's the oblique set that they have, is going to be a similar size to this as well. So that is the size difference. So if you've got large hands, like really big hands, you'll probably find it hard using these smaller ones, and you might think about going for the larger ones. But in terms of quality, like these ones, the smaller ones, are still so good. When I was doing my sort of training, we didn't have any access to those sort of ones, so I've bought a lot of 1/2-inch size ones. So I would stitch, the majority of my work with a 1/2-inch stitching iron, because that's all I could afford at the time. But yeah, those sets are really good. I think they're about £21 to £25 excluding VAT from Abbey, England. So if you are in the lookout for some stitch markers, those sort of at a reasonable price, those little sets are really good. Right, so stitch marking. So when I'm stitch marking something like this where it's got a point, I'm actually going to start from this point end and work my way up, because I want this to match in the middle. I don't want to accidentally have like one too many, or have it so there's like a little weird half stitch at the end. So I'm going to start, and we're going to just go, I usually just go so it's just around the corner, then I can use this larger one along the straight. So sorry if you're wearing headphones, I hope that's not too loud for you. And you'll see that I'm just pricking the surface, like I'm not stitch marking all the way through or anything like that, because we will always with our stitching awl. So that's our little end done. So we're going to do the same again now on the handle side. So starting from the centre of our little semicircle pointy shape, and then working our way down the long sides. And I like to work on the line that's farthest away from me. Oh, my phone's just fallen over. What's that? When will you resume your one-to-one classes? Yes, so I will be resuming my one-to-one sort of classes here, where you can come to the workshop for the day or a few days, depending on what you would like to learn. At the moment, I don't have a start date for when that can be, but I am hoping that later this year they will be able to go ahead. I managed to get in a couple last year in between lockdowns, so I am hopeful that they will be able to start later this year, but at the moment I can't give any sort of idea on even like a month at the moment. I'm sorry, because we don't have any sort of proper concrete information sort of come through to us as to when that's likely to be. One thing that I am going to try and get started though as a sort of intermediary between it but also sort of going on in the future is some sort of online tuition where you can sort of book an hour or a few hours depending on what projects you are sort of wanting to talk about, or if you have any skills that you want to sort of just go over, or just any questions in general. So I will be offering them, I haven't decided yet, either via Zoom or Skype or something, and we can do some like one-to-one sort of just web sessions. I don't really know what you would call them. But yeah, so that is something that I am hoping to do, and it will also give sort of you guys overseas a chance if you do want to have sort of a lesson with me. It's a bit easier than coming all the way to Wales. So that is something that I'll be sort of looking into. So if you are interested in that, if you want, you can email me on info@JHLeather.co.uk just with your interest, and as soon as they're sort of ready to go, I can let you know. But also once they are sorted and integrated into my website, then I will be doing an announcement on them as well. So, but just have to keep your eyes peeled. Right, we are getting there with this stitch marking. Yes, so can your irons go all the way through? So it depends on what you are stitching. So if you were stitching like a wallet or something sort of small and thin, then yes, you can stitch mark all the way through. That's not a problem. It's when you sort of get to this thicker stuff that it can be an issue. I mean, these irons should be able to go all the way through because they've got the length of them, but it's getting them to line up. So if you were doing like a turn, so on this end where we've got the turn, it's getting everything to line up so that when they come through on the other side that they're actually going to be in the right place and where you want them. So yeah, it depends what you're stitching really. I mean, I don't, if I'm doing like this or a collar, especially if it's a padded collar, because you can't stitch mark through the padding because, like I say, depending on where that is going to be when you're stitch marking, you might accidentally have the stitch marks come through on the other side the wrong, like where you don't want them. So my suggestion would be lots and lots of practice with an awl, I'm afraid, and having a sharp awl is going to really help you. So when I do my one-to-one lessons here, one of the first sort of bits that we do is a stitching sort of test, especially for sort of people who haven't done any stitching before, and we will just stitch, and I would do it with bridal leather as well just to make it really challenging, just like 6-7 inch bit all the way around, and it's just that repeatedness of having it sort of going around, sort of you're going to stitch this whole thing in one go, and you can see the difference between where you start and when you finish, because you're going to sort of get, especially if you can keep all the items in your hands, that's the real sort of important bit. If you're putting your awl, if you're picking it up and putting it down all the time, you might accidentally pick it up slightly differently like the next time, so that can cause your stitching to be a bit wonky. But yeah, so my recommendation is lots of practice, and a nice sharp awl is going to help no end, because you're not going to be like trying to yam it through. So by having it sharp, it's going to make it a bit easier for you, and also over time you're going to build the muscles up that you need to help you push it through the leather as well. So yeah, when it comes to stitching like real thick stuff, it's practice, I'm afraid. There's no real quick way to do it. So if you've got like leather scraps and stuff just do like stitching like test bits on there, and you know, the repetition, you're going to get the muscle memory, you're going to find out what works for you, like how to hold your clams, how you're going to hold your awl, and that sort of thing, and sort of go through it that way would be my suggestion. How do you make sure all holes line up? What if you start in the wrong spot? So that's why when we're sort of measuring it out, it's like when I did this end, you know, I've got the buckle in there, or the trigger clip in there, so I know I can't go past that spot. So you just sort of stitch mark up to your lines and do it that way would be my suggestion. I think that answers that question. Alright, let's put that back up that way. Oh no, David! I pushed it all right through my fun on my first project. Ouch! Yeah, I can imagine that hurt, hey? Yeah, so you're going to want to keep your fingers out of the way when you are awling as well. So yesterday on my little test stream, I've not done it for so long, but I put my needle straight into my thumb, which was less than ideal. But it still happens. Right, so what I am doing now on this lead is just making some room. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually skive the ends of these turns, because we don't want it to be full thickness. So what we're going to do is we're just going to skive from, what I generally do is just past where my egg point is, or where my shaped point is. So it's going to be like about that much. It's about 3/4 of an inch on this. Obviously, if you're doing a wider lead or collar or whatever it is you're making, you're going to want to sort of start a bit further back. So there, I can measure it if you like. Yeah, it's about 3/4 of an inch back from the end, just over. And we're just going to carefully now skive this down to half thickness, and we want this even. Just taking a bit more off here. Oops. And this is going to give us a nice transition once we get this stitched in place. So rather than having it all clunky, and we'll do the same on the other end. Super. Right, so I'm doing this on a tile. This is just a granite tile that I've got. So if I don't use this, then on the workbench behind you, you'll see there's a big wooden block. I also sort of use that when I'm skiving. Oh, my nose. Right, so now we've done that, what we're just going to do is we're going to cut off any fluffy bits, because you can get them when you've done your skiving. We don't really want fluffy bits. So super. Right, we're getting there, guys. So right, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to prepare, wrong way around, this padding area. So let me just get my padding. Here we are. So the padding that I am using is 6mm Plastizote foam. So this I get from Abbey, England. I think if you actually search for Plastizote, then I think it is actually quite a common foam. So, and I'm using, this is a soft grey from Abbey, and this is 6mm thick. You can get thicker or thinner depending on what you are going for, but I find the 6mm stuff works really well. And so what I'm going to do is mark myself a line. Did I leave myself any pens? Yes, I did. And so my lead here is 5/8 of an inch wide. So I'm going to add 1/8 of an inch to that for my padding. So I'm going to mark my padding strip 3/4 of an inch wide. And I find that that gives this sort of, with the nappa hide, which is 0.8 8mm thick. It just gives it a nice balance. If you're using a thicker hide, so if you're padding leather, it's like 1.4mm thick, then I would suggest only adding about 1/16 of an inch to your padding foam, just to account for the extra bulk that the sort of thicker leather will give. Super. Right, there's me other knife. It's just Fidget hoodie. Did you like it? It's nice, eh? My mum and my stepdad got it for my birthday. So, I'm not sure if they're watching. She kept calling it a Zoom thing when I was talking to her about it earlier. So, I did send her the link, so I'm not sure. Hopefully they're watching. It's quite nice though, isn't it? Put that down. So, I've cut my strip of leather, and what I'm going to do is just square one end, so we can start with a nice square end, and then flipping this over. I just want to, I didn't mark it on earlier, now this is a problem, my rulers have camouflaged themselves, there it is. So I'm just going to actually mark my 2.5 inches from this other end, because I don't want my padding to be too much longer than that. There we go. So right, so I got my start and my start for where my padding is going to be. So here, so what I've done, like I said, I've squared one end. So what I'm going to do now is just taper this, because obviously we've cut this wider than our strap. So we just want to taper that, and you want to taper it a bit more than sort of what you think, because we are going to wrap this up in leather, so it's going to add to it. Is there a specific awl for bridal leather? Not that I have found. So it depends on what you're stitching. So if you were stitching, so bridal work covers a range of stuff. So if you're stitching a bridal, you're going to be wanting to stitch that in 10 stitches per inch. So if you've got a big old awl, that's not going to look great when you've actually auled your holes. It's going to mush them around a bit. So if I show you, it's not in very good condition, this awl. But for comparison, this is my bridal stitching awl. Oh, Tim, can you just swap? So this is my bridal stitching awl. So you can see that's quite small, and this is my dog collar / everything else awl. So you can see there's a big difference in size, and although this smaller awl is going to go through a lot more layers, it has to be this small in terms of like width, because the number 10 stitch marker is so much smaller than a 7 or an 8. So this one is a lot shorter than it was, because I dropped it on the floor and the end broke off, which is less than ideal. But I do find that with if you have like a long skinny awl like this one, when you go like awling through all those layers, it has a tendency to buckle on itself, and I have had a few awl blades do that in the past when I'm stitching bridal work. So I think this one actually measures just over 5/8 of an inch where it comes out of the handle. So it would probably have been probably like a 1 1/4 inch blade, maybe 1 1/2, probably 1 1/4. I think it was probably about a 1 1/4 inch blade, around that to start with, and then you just want to shape it down so it actually goes through your number 10 stitching holes easier. And then if you were stitching something larger, like, so I've got this big awl, let's take the bumper off of it. So this one is a different handle as well. So this awl measures 1 3/8 where it comes out of the handle. So this would have been probably a 2 inch blade. Maybe, no, probably 1 3/4 inch blade this one would have been. But this is a different handle. So this one's got this sort of connector on it, so I can actually just take the awl blade out. Let's pop it back in, so I can actually measure it properly for you. And yeah, so this would have been, it's measuring 1 7/8 of an inch. So let's get that in. So it's about 45 millimeters long. And this is the awl that I use pretty much every day. I love this awl. Although the handle is quite big, I find this one is quite nice because you've got the flat side on it. It sits in your hand nicely. Let's do that up. It's quite an old one, this, so tighten that. But if you are using an awl like this, where it's got like a metal connector thing, you just want to just pop a little leather washer on there, just because if your metal bit is hitting your leather, it can mark it. So if you just put like a little leather washer on, that's all you need, and then it won't mark your leather if you're all the way through. Super. Right, okay, so we've got our one end of our padding cut down into a taper and skived. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do the other side now. So we want to hold that on. So we've got our marks where the actual sort of handle is going to be stitched to itself. And we're just going to actually fit this so it fits between these two points. And then we're going to do the same on this end. So we've cut it. We're just going to taper this end. Why do I work in inches? That's a good question. So, yeah, in the UK, we do use centimetres and millimetres and all that. But in the saddlery industry, they do not use that. So I went through school doing everything in centimetres and millimetres, and life was great. And then I started to do saddlery, and everything is in inches in the UK for saddlery. I don't know if it's just like a traditional thing. So now I can't measure anything easily in centimetres, so that's why I work in inches. It's just because it's a saddlery thing, and I've been doing this for about 13 years. So it's quite hard to swap over. I am trying, but it's still, because it's so much easier for me to just be like, oh, that's 5/8 of an inch, rather than, what's 5/8 of an inch? Is that what, 16 millimeters? Something like that. Yeah, so I'm getting there with it, but I just, because I'm so used to working in inches, that's what comes out of my mouth, I'm afraid. So, yeah. Super. Right, so we've got our padding foam now cut to size. So we're going to just pop this lead over here, because we don't need that for a minute, and get our padding leather. So, like I said earlier, this is a chrome tan sheep nappa. So it's nice and soft and thin. And this is ideal for padding handles and stuff. Oh, don't blow away. So what we're going to do is just going to roughly cut this size, if I remember where my knife is. Whoop. So, yeah, that's loads. And so, just going to roll this up and get that out of the way, keep the area a bit more tidy than what I usually do. Right, so glue time. Where's my glue board? I got this mat, and you can see I have glued on it, and I should probably clean it. So what we're going to do is actually do this on the glue board. So I will be using my contact adhesive. Like I said earlier, this is Bostik 6092, and you can tell because I've written that lovingly on the glue pot here. And so with contact adhesive, you do need to wait for it a little bit to go off before you can stick things together. So what we're going to do, we're just going to put this on and then put some on our foam. Now if you can't get a hold of any plastizate, you can use neoprene padding foam if that is easier for you to get hold of. You basically want some foam that's not too hard or too soft. I know that's a really helpful comment for me to say. But yeah, neoprene, something that like neoprene would work absolutely fine. Oh, questionable. I find Talcum causes dull staining if it gets on another surface. How can I clean this off afterwards? So, if you accidentally do get your Talcum on your leather, what I would generally do is you can usually see where it's gone on, because obviously it's usually white, so you should be able to see it. Just wipe that off so as soon as you sort of see it. Like I said, I use a stain cloth, so I would just use my stain cloth and just wipe it off, and that hasn't seemed to cause me any issues. Now, I don't know if that is because I used a finished hide. So like I said earlier, this comes to me coloured. So I'm not sure if on like a natural sort of hide that you've stained yourself, it might react differently. But if you can wipe it off early enough, and if you need to, maybe try using like a slightly dampened cloth. That might help a bit. Right, so we've got our padding and our leather stuck together. So what we want to do is we're going to trim this padding leather down. So there's a couple of options for you. What you can do, if this is still quite new to you, is draw a line down the centre of your padding foam, so you've got a bit of a guide to go to. But what we want to do is we're just going to curl the leather up and just mark roughly where it hits the centre of our foam. It doesn't matter if it overlaps a little bit in the middle here once it's trimmed down, but you don't want it to overlap too much, because you don't want to accidentally have like an edge sort of poking out once you've stitched it on. That's not going to look too great. So just going to mark it on, and then we'll just trim this down. Right, put that out of the way so I don't get pen everywhere. Oh, I got my scissors caught in the microphone. There we go. With different pricking irons work on different thicknesses of leather, would the stitches look different? So they should all look pretty similar, to be honest. So the only thing that's really going to affect how they would look would be the size of your awl and the size of the thread that you're using, I'd say. So I use, like I said earlier, 3.35mm pricking irons, and I use, oh, I can tell you, I think, no I can't, I think it's 0.55mm thread, and I find that that combination works really well together. If you were stitching in 10, you would want to use a finer thread, like a 0.35mm thread. I think it's the best one for that. But generally, if you were stitching like a 10 on a bridle and a 10 on a wallet, they would look pretty similar, and it wouldn't affect it too much, if at all. Do you have a Discord link? Yes, the Discord link should be in the description. Oh no, did I not put it in? Oh, whoops. The Discord link will be in the description soon. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I put that in. A bit of a rookie mistake, wasn't it? Oh, I know why it's not in there. I took it from a video, from my last video, and I put it in a different place. But I will put a link to the Discord in after the stream is finished, or I'm not too sure if Tim might be able to add it in there for you. There you go. Tim's just added the link in the chat now. So hope to see you on the Discord soon. Yes, Tim is my technical geek today. So yeah, he's doing all the camera switching and feeding the questions over. Right. So, right, what we're going to do now is actually wrap this foam with our padding leather. So what we're going to do is we don't want any baggy bits on it, so what I like to do is just sort of roll it to one side and then just make sure that you're rolling the leather up so you don't get any baggy bits on that edge. We don't really want that to happen. So, and you are going to get glue on your fingers if you don't use gloves like I don't. And then we're just going to fold it over. So I generally start when I fold it over from one end and then just work my way down. I'm just going to roll this over so it's nice and flat. And then when we get to this other end, we're going to do the tapered end first and then work our way back up because we don't want any lumpy bits, and that's the best way that I've found to work that out. And now we've done this one side, what I like to do is I just roll this because we got this side, we're not going to stick to anything now. Just so it's nice and it's flush against our padding foam. And then once again we'll start from one end and we're going to work our way down, folding this as we go. So you can see this bit here is a bit too big, so I will trim that because we don't want to have the risk of it poking out once it's stitched in. There we go, super. Right, so I'm just going to trim this bit here because it's a bit big and it's not really necessary to be there. Super, right. So we will do this on both angles of the camera. So I'll do it on this GoPro top down first. So what we're going to do is we're going to taper and trim the ends sort of at the same time. So what I'm going to do is hold my scissors at an angle, and so I can feel in here where the foam is, and we're just going to cut that off like so. So what that's done is sort of given it a bit of a skive at the same time, so we're not going to have any like rough cut edges. Like if I cut it straight, you'd get sort of the finished edges of this nappa foam and nappa leather, and we don't really want that. So by doing it with our scissors on an angle, it sort of skives it at the same time. So I'll just measure it up, and then if we can swap to the other camera, Tim, so I can show from that angle. Super. Yeah, so if it didn't come across that well on the top one, what I've done, I know where my padding foam is in here, I can feel that, and I'm going to hold my scissors at an angle like so, and I'm just going to cut that off. You might need to even it up a bit, but yeah, so that's giving it, you can see hopefully it's got like a little taper to it, and both my cut edges are facing this way, so we're not, once that's stitched in, we're not going to see any cut sort of rough edges on this padding foam and leather combo. So I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, so I'm hoping that makes sense to you guys. And now we've done that, what we can do is we can actually glue this in place. So again, with the contact adhesive, we're going to just glue this on. So when I'm doing the dog leads, I will glue this, just glue the foam in on, or the padded section on, stitch that, and then I'll sort of sort out the turn once we've done it all, because it's a bit easier to do it that way around rather than faffing around with it a bit. Do you need to backstitch when starting a saddle stitch? That's a good question. It depends on what it is you are making and what sort of area you are sort of stitching. So on this lead, we will start with a backstitch on the buckle end, and we'll finish with a back stitch. We'll do 1.5 back stitch. We'll probably start with 2 just so it's even on both sides. When there is an area of stress or sort of tension, like so around a buckle or something like that, then that's when you want to definitely do a back stitch, because not only is that going to keep that leather nice and tight and make it nice and tight to the buckle or the clip that you're stitching in, it's also going to lock those threads in place. So, but it would depend. So if we're doing, so like on this lead, we're not going to be able to stitch this in one length of thread. So when I do my swap over, I will do 1.5 back stitches, but I won't start with the back stitch because it's not going to be an area of strength. This padding is just sort of decorative, so we don't need to do back stitch where like there's not an area of stress or anything like that. But it does, like I said, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a wallet, I would start and stop with, well, start with 2 back stitches and finish with 1.5, because then the start end of your stitching and the finish end of your stitching are going to match, if that makes sense. Right. This is the question, have I got this in the middle? So I usually do this at the window, but hopefully this light will see. So when you're stitching or gluing your foam on, you want to make sure it's in the middle. And the great thing about this contact adhesive is that if it's slightly off, you can just peel it off and just sort of apply it or stick it down. Super, right, that's that side done. So I'm going to leave that bit now, and we're going to put our clip on. So for this end, I am actually going to use some tacks. So depending on what it is I'm stitching will depend if I tack it or not. Because we've got the buckle in here, if we glue this alone, it's unlikely that it's going to stay down. So I like to just put a tack in or 2. So what I'm going to do, I've put the clip in and making sure that that's lined up with our marks on the back that we made earlier. And now these tacks that I use here are 16mm long. I think they're shoe tacks. It's one of these things that I've bought years and years ago and not had to purchase any new ones, but I'm pretty sure they're like shoe tacks. So put the first one in, and generally easier to put the one that's furthest away in first, because you've not got the leather's not trying to push itself away from each sort of side like it is here at the turn end. I'm just going to put in a couple here. Find some tacks that aren't bent would be good. Put another one in there. Super. Right, so this is ready for stitching. There we go. Right, so what I will be using. So there's a couple of different thread options that you can use. So the ones, or the company that I've been using are, you know what, I went on Google to learn how to pronounce it and I've forgotten. So I shall hold it up to the camera. So there's a couple of different threads. So I like to use these ones, and so I've got, these are from oh no, how did I say it? I learnt it and everything. No, gosh. I will put a link in the description at the end of this video for the threads that I'm using. But if I hold it up to the camera now, so there are 2 types of thread. This is the waxed, so the waxing leather is a waxed polyester thread, and so I've been using that a lot for my dog collars because and the leads, because dogs have got more of a tendency to go in water and stuff like that, and if you're using a linen thread, like linen can rot. It is a natural product. Even if you put, you can put loads and loads of beeswax on it, if it's still eventually going to break down. But they do have the Maisie Superfine range, so that is the linen thread that I use, and this is both from the same company, and they've got such a nice range of colours. And over here, this is a lot easier to get hold of than some of the sort of linen cable thread, which I have used in the past. So there's not a UK supplier that I found for that. So this Pro Adhesive, oh goodness, sorry about that, guys. But this company where I get those threads from, it's really good. Like I said, they got lots of different range to choose from. So we are going to be using the waxing thread, which, like I said, it is it's a cabled thread. This is why I like it. So a lot of people sort of will be using tiger thread, and personally I hate tiger thread because I don't like that it's flat. So this waxing thread that I'm using here, it is a cabled thread, so it's like a linen thread, so it's round and not flat, which is what we want, because that's going to give us a nicer sort of finish to our stitching, really. So I'm just taking a length of this. We don't need too much. I'm going to start on the clip end. I'm just going to attach my needles. So when I attach my needles, I do 2 sort of locking through threads. So I'm going to pop it on the needle, and then we're going to put the needle through the thread twice. So you get like a little S shape, and then we can just pull that over the end. So that's just locked both of the needles. You can do it once, but I find having it done twice is a bit easier. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to move this top down camera, because we're going to start stitching and you're not going to be able to see from there. So if I pop this in here now, Tim, if you keep it on the big camera whilst I do this, so people don't get motion sickness, because I've just got to move this around. So it's very technical here at JHLeather. Just use that to hold that in place. I could probably do it with my leg, to be honest. So hopefully, I've had a bit of trouble with this top down mount today. It's been playing up a bit. But hopefully, let me get in. Sorry, Sky. Right, so is that angle alright?
Rotate towards me.
That way? That way? There? Super. Right. There we go. Tighten that up so it doesn't fall off. Super duper then. So we will be stitching, like I said, we're going to stitch this end on first, and I'm going to do 2 back stitches to start, because we're going to finish with 1.5 back stitches. This will just make it so it's nice and even. So this is where I find that I've put the camera awkwardly for myself, but it should be okay. Yeah, it's the first stitch. So I find when you're stitching, if you even it up again after your first stitch, that's the best time to do it, because it's that first stitch where they go a bit wonky, and you can still just, there we go, work it out. Oh, I don't think I ordered that one. There's my 2 back stitches. So I'm just going to stitch forward now. Now hopefully I won't do what I did yesterday and stab myself with a needle, because that would be less than ideal. And so what I'm doing, let me just flip this around a bit. Where I want this sort of stitch over the top to go, I don't want it to actually be on top of this thread. I want it to be either above or below it. And it will naturally want to sit at either one of them. So we can just sort of help that, sort of do that with our needle. Just get it so it sits on top. So if you have a look, you can see that that sort of second stitch there is on top of it, or above it would be a better way to describe it, rather than over it, because we don't, if it goes over it, it can sit a bit proud, and that can be an area of rubbing, because it will sit proud of the leather. So by having it so it sits either above or below that first stitch, means that it's going to have a less sort of chance of doing that. And so this second one that I've just done, that's naturally wanting to sit underneath. So if we have a look, so you can see got to, and now we can just carry on stitching. So I think I'm just gonna, I've got this big blind next to me, so I'm just gonna open that so I got a bit more light and I can see. There we go, the sun's gone down now, so that's gonna make things a bit better for the cameras. But yeah, so we're just going to sit and stitch this little clip in. And did I put them in a handy location? Yes, I did. Pull our things out as we go. And you can see when I'm sort of putting my needle back through, I'm going over the edge. We're going to do a cast on this, and that's going to keep both of our, or both sides of our stitching at that nice slanted angle. Okay, so that's a good question. So someone's just asked, do you find that your back stitches, oh no, I've forgotten the wording of it. Can you hold it back up? So you find your back stitches don't look as good as the front stitches, and using I use a round dent chisel which pokes a clean hole in front but not in the back. So if you're using a diamond iron, because they aren't as slanted, I think that does affect the stitching on the back a little bit, because the diamond chisels, like the holes aren't as slanted. It's like you can see, you know, these stitching sort of prick marks are at an angle. I don't think that the ones on the chisels aren't as prominent, so that can, I think, have an effect on it. But if you make sure you do a cast on the back, so you want to roll your thread over your needle, that's going to definitely help with that. And in terms of, if you've stitched marked all the way through, then your stitching on the back should be fine. If you're using an awl like me, unfortunately it's one of those things that takes time to learn, and you know, it takes a lot of time. So I mean, I've been doing this now, including my training, for nearly 13 years, and even my stitching on the back can go a bit astray sometimes. So don't sort of put yourself down. When you're just learning out, you know, the stitching is the hardest part to master, but practice makes perfect. And if you're using a nice sharp awl, that is the key. If your awl's blunt and you're trying to force it through, it's going to go through at all sorts of angles. But if you can get that nice and sharp so that it's a lot easier for you to push through, then that's going to help your stitching sort of neaten up very fast. I'm really confused.
The last comment.
Oh, sorry. I only have this problem with round dent chisels. Stitching looks fine when using pricking eyes and saddle stitching. Yeah, so I think it's probably it would be the chisels then. I don't really use the chisels. I have some here for specific sort of jobs that I have for them, but not so much like on all my leather work. You'll see that I will use the pricking irons. So, I mean, are you casting? That would be the only thing. I'd make sure you do that. But I think other than that, if it would be the irons, I think that they don't sort of help with it. So that's a really badly answered question, I think. But yeah, I would say it's the chisels that are the issue, not your stitching. Alright, so nearly done. Whoop, this clip end. And then we've got the padding to do. So padding's always fun to stitch, especially when you're sort of just starting out, because you all seems to get lost in the padding and you can't find the holes again. But I've shown you how you can sort of get around that a bit, or at least not get your needles lost in the old padding. Is there a lamport suitable for dog collars? So I think the thickest one they do is 3.5 millimeters thick, and that would be fine for dog collars. So the reason that I use bridal butt is that it's just something that I'm used to using, and it's a hider that I like. So one thing to note, if you are going to use a shoulder, depending on how long the collar is going to be, if it's possible, depending on the size of the hide, you want your point end to be near the spine, because that's the strongest part of the shoulder. So yeah, if you can use a shoulder, and the lamport, the thickest one that they do, would be fine for that. But yeah, if you can start, obviously if you've got like a super long collar you might not be able to, but if you've got sort of, because I think their hides are like 50 something inches long, so you should be able to get it. So you'll have your hide, and if you can sort of start from the middle out, it's awkward, but that's going to be like your best sort of area, is going to be the closest to the spine. Right, so we've stitched this first bit. Just cut those off. Super. There we go. So that's the that side done. Now I have to remember where I put my thread to. There it is. And so for this, I mean, you might not be able to see it. I think I've managed to put the camera right in front of my face. No. So when you're stitching long sort of areas, I generally like to go on an arm span as a technical length for your thread. With this, we're not going to be able to fit or stitch the whole thing in one easily. So stitching with your arm span is a lot more manageable than if you stitch it with, so it's longer, just because you're just going to have bits of thread all over the place. So I mean, I think I'm like 5'2", 5'3", so that's my arm span. And then, because you know, once you've got your needles on, it's going to be a little bit shorter, because that's going to take up a little bit of room. But that's what we're going to do, rather than measuring it out and faffing around with that. So, got the new thread made up. So when we're doing this, so I'm going to start from this front side. We want to make sure that we do get like a stitch with our padding in it, sort of, so it sort of tucks it in. So what I do is I hold it where I want it to be, and then I just mark with my thumb, okay, well that's the one I got to start from. And then we want to even it up on the other side, so we're going to stop here, and then we can stitch mark between those. Oh, and I've very helpfully marked it on the other side, so what I'm going to start on. So that was helpful. So we'll do that again. So just going to line it up, mark where we want to start our stitching. So basically we'll have one stitch that's going to go through all of these layers just to keep these in, because if we start it here, if that opens up, then you can sort of just get rubbish in that down there, so we don't really want that. So marked it on one side, it's going to line up with that there, and now we can pop these in the clams and we can get stitching again. Super duper. So on this one, I'm not going to start with a back stitch because this isn't going to be an area of stress. When we get on to actually stitching the handle to the rest of it, that's when we will do some back stitches. We don't really need it for this because this is just like decorative, really. And then just stitch all the way along. So I was saying earlier about how padding can be a bit awkward to stitch, especially when you're learning, because your needles seemingly get lost in the padding. So once I get onto the thicker bit, I'll be able to show you sort of good way of doing it. So especially when you're starting out, once you sort of stitch padding a bit more often and you're a bit used to it, it gets easier. But if you put your awl through and then you want to follow your awl back through with your needle, that's going to give you the best chance of getting your needle back out through the hole, because they do have a tendency to get lost. And what you'll find is that you'll be stitching merrily, you'll be all happy, and then you'll just get to one point and it will take you forever just to get that needle through the padding and through the hole that you've auled. And no matter how much faffing you do, it just takes forever to find. So by doing it, if you follow your awl back through, that's the best method, especially if you get stuck. You can just be like, oh, let's follow that through, and the needle should come out. Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So different people using different techniques. You will find whoever sort of, everyone learns differently, and so my training was quite a traditional saddlery based training. So I do things differently to a lot of the YouTubers that I watch that do Leathercraft, and I think it's just because of the way that I was taught. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do things. So some ways can be easier, but as long as you get the result that you want, like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do things. So I do things my way, and someone else might do things slightly differently, but as long as we both get in the same results, it's whatever works for you. What works best for you is sort of the method you want to go down, really. So hopefully that answers your question. So I did another question here. I got the chat up on my phone as well. So, do you have to cut your leather, or is it pre-stripped when you buy it? So the hides I get mostly are bridal butts, and I buy them as like a hide, so they're not cut into strips. And what I will do is, if you saw my last video that got released on Monday, I have a tool here. Well, it's not really a tool, it's just a really long ruler. It's a straight edge, and so I would be able to mark that onto my hide and make sure that cut that so that edge is nice and straight, and then I can cut the straps myself to whatever width I want with a tool called a strap cutter. And so that's how I get my strips for my projects. Stitching series. What would you like to see in the stitching series, Nigel?
No.
No? Hang on.
Nigel Romeo. Have you heard of him?
Is that A thread? Or is it, do you mean Nigel Armitage on Vimeo?
Yes.
Oh, I don't have a Vimeo account, so I've not actually seen Nigel's sort of stitching series to be able to comment on that, I'm afraid. So that was a bit of a blew that question up to more than it was going to be. So what thread do you recommend, waxed or nylon? So it depends what you're stitching. So like here I'm doing the dog collar. This is a waxed polyester thread, which I think works well for the collars and the leads and stuff like that, because they're going to get a bit more sort of wear to the natural elements being out and being on the dogs and stuff like that. So for this sort of stuff I would use this waxed polyester, and then the other thread that I use is linen, a natural linen thread. I get unwaxed and then I wax it myself. Just that's the way that I've always done it, so that's what I buy. I haven't used a waxed linen thread before, but I imagine either a waxed linen or a normal linen waxed yourself would be the same result at the end of it. Oh, let's see. Would you recommend getting an electric creaser to use on edges along with edge paint? So I don't use edge paint that often. I've got some here because I'm trying to learn how to use it. But the problem that I have is that I'm a bit too impatient, I think. So having to wait for it to dry, I'm not too great at that, and I prefer to use stains and sort of having a burnished edge, as that's what I prefer in general anyway. But in terms of having an electric creaser, it's what works for you, really. Or is that, hang on, would you recommend getting an extrusion edges? So I mean, I heat my creaser myself to sort of a temperature that I sort of use for my leather work, but having an electric one, obviously if you're going to have an electric one, that's going to set it to the same temperature all the time, so once it's at heat, you know that's fine to use and you're not going to burn anything or anything like that. I don't personally have any experience with an electric creaser in terms of, do they come to a preset heat or do you have to set it yourself? So I mean, if you can set it yourself, you just got to do a few tests before just to make sure that it's not too hot, really. Is it okay to backstitch 4 layers, 2mm / 4 to 5 ounces, or do you have to punch the holes? So I think you are referring maybe to like stitch marking all the way through, I think, rather than the back stitch. So yeah, I mean, if you're happy to stitch mark all the way through, that's not a problem. Like I said earlier, I mean, it's, you know, what works for you. I find that, especially on doing stuff like this, just using the pricking iron on my awl is fine for me. But on the thinner stuff, so if I am sort of making like a wallet, I do find that if you stitch mark all the way through, it is a lot easier to stitch and get your stitching straight, because with the thin leather it does have a tendency to pucker if you do it too tight, so you've got to be aware of that. But if you have it so it's stitch marked all the way through, then it really does help with the smaller, thinner sort of projects. So hopefully that helps. Why don't you use a sewing machine? Because I'm not a very good machinist, is the honest answer. But also, with a machine stitch, it's a chain stitch. So if for whatever reason, you know, there's wear on whatever it is you're stitching and the thread breaks, you'll see it on your clothes. The whole sort of, if you pull at it, the whole thread can sort of come loose and the whole sort of item will come apart. So when you're doing hand stitching, especially when you're doing this like double hand or saddle stitching like what we're doing here, it's basically, it locks on itself, especially, you're doing this cast, it's going to lock the thread in between the leather. So if for whatever reason any one of these sort of stitches wore off eventually, if they wore off eventually, you know that the whole thing's not going to come unravelled at any time. So I mean that would be the main reason, but also I don't have much experience with a sewing machine. I do have a sewing machine and I don't use it that often, so it is probably something that I am probably going to look to move on this year, because I don't think I've used it for pretty much anything. At least I know I didn't last year, so yeah, that would be that. What leather skill do you find hardest or wish you had? Oh, that's a good question. So honestly, even though I was complaining about it earlier, or saying that I've not used it because I'm impatient, edge paint is something that I would actually quite like to learn properly, because sort of doing more of the finer Leathercraft stuff, using the edge paint on them I think is going to be better than using the stain, because you'll be able to burnish it, especially if you're using a chrome tanned leather. You can't really stain it as what you can do with a veg tanned leather. So it would probably be to learn how to do proper edge painting and make it really nice would be something that I would like to do. But also sort of I'm trying to get more into doing the finer Leathercraft stuff, so like with the wallets and that sort of thing, because I really enjoy doing them. So getting more time to do that would be nice. How many times to polish after drying for bags and purses? Dyeing, sorry. That would depend on the leather, so, and sort of what your edges are like. If you've got a nice flushed finish, you could probably, if you're using edge paint, I would say 2, maybe 3 coats would be enough. And you want to make sure it dries properly in between, which is where I sort of fall down really on that, because I'm not very good at waiting for them to dry properly. And what you can do is you can actually do a little bit of light sanding in between, just to make sure you get a nice even and level edge. Right, coming to the end of this thread, so I will do 1.5 back stitches because we want to lock the thread off here, and again making sure that that sits either above or below the stitch that we're going back onto. And if I can cut these off. How much tension are you applying to stitch? I would be worried about the padding side. So yes, you want to, it's one of these things, unless you're stitching it, it's a bit hard to explain, because you want to put enough tension on it but not too much, because yes, with this is sort of quite a fine leather, but usually it's fine. Sometimes you'll get to an area of the hide where there might be a sort of a weaker spot, maybe there's a scar in it that you've not seen, and that's where you can get some issues on the padding. But I mean, you'll see I'm putting quite tight on it really, and the more you stitch it, the more you will sort of come to recognise how much you can actually sort of, how much pressure you can put through it. So let's just start this up again. Let's see. So I guess the answer is enough but not too much. I mean, I don't really know how to explain that really. Yeah, enough but not too much, I'm afraid. I mean, like I said, I mean, unless you're sort of stitching it, it's hard to see. But you can see I'm not too gentle with this when I'm pulling it tight. Different stitching techniques. We could do that as a video option if you'd like. I mean, the ones that I use, I mean, this is the one that I use the most, is the double hand stitching. I do use it like a single hand stitch for when I'm stitching running loops, but for the majority of your sort of leather work, if you're hand stitching, you're going to be wanting to use this sort of double stitch, or saddle stitch as well as it's known. So it gives the best results and the best overall finish. So we're nearly there with this side of our stitching, and just got to stitch the other side and a few finishing touches, and when we go home, Skylar will have a nice fancy new lead. She won't care one bit. Do you have a go-to leather for wallets in general? So yeah, you've used the butter row. That's not something that I've actually used. It's something that I want to try, but I have so much leather here, I can't really justify getting more in just to test that. But at the moment, I'm actually using like a greased pig skin. It's so nice. I've used both the dry pig skin and the greased pig skin. The dry stuff is fine to use, but this greased pig skin, it's got such a nice feel to it. So you do have to buff it quite a lot, because it is pretty, like it said, it's a greased sort of hide, so it's basically got tallow all over it, so you need to like buff that off with a cloth or a brush. But there's just something about pig skin, it's such a nice, well, to me it's got such a nice sort of feel and to it, and because pigs have got such like the deep hair follicle, it's got such a nice sort of pattern to it as well. Another hide, or another sort of skin that I've been using for wallets, is the Arlen Sully goat hides. They are some very nice hides, and they got some lovely colours to choose from. But like I said, I ordered from them, I think it was December, so it was before Brexit, and I've not had, I ordered a few hides just for a little sort of bits and pieces that I was doing, and I've still got that left, so I haven't had to make another order with them, so I'm not too sure how easy it's going to be to get hold of this time around. But so the greased pigskin that I'm using is I'm getting from Abbey, England, and it's a veg tan pigskin, so you can still stain it, the edges, and it's just really nice leather. And I've got a bell skiver here, so I actually, for wallets, I will split it down on the bell skiving machine, and it skives through there really nicely. And so yeah, it's just a really nice thing to work with. It can be a bit awkward because it's so textured when you're stitch marking, but if you stitch mark like all the way through, then you'll be fine with that. Have we got any more questions coming through? I see that's years of practice, John. I've been doing it a little bit longer than you, but you'll get there. I mean, when you came here and did your course, you weren't slow. It's just years of repetition. It'd be quite interesting to know. I could probably do a query on my website to see how many collars or leads that I've made. That could be quite an interesting thing to look at. Tim is no. Yes. No, Tim is here doing all the typing for me and helping out with the questions. He is my technical helper today. Oh, as if by magic. Where is Puppy? Yeah, she is. So in my workshop, I've got these big, sort of like settee, sort of single seat, like sofa chairs, and she is currently in one of them, and she's clucking at something. I think Tim made a bang, and she's upset about it. But it's also so it's 6 o'clock, so she gets fed at 5:30 usually. So she's probably quite unhappy about not getting fed on time, but she is still here. So, good leather type for a newbie. So I would say it depends on what it is you're making as to what leather you would want. A good shoulder hide would be a good place to start, but it depends on what it is you're making really. If you're making, or if you're wanting to make belts and stuff like that, then you'd want like a thick shoulder, and you can use that for dog leads and collars as well. If you're making wallets, then you're going to want something sort of thin, so like a 1mm hide, maybe 1.5 maximum thickness, and you can use that for bags and stuff as well. But it depends on what you're making. What size is that awl blade? So the one that I've got in this big haft here is 1 3/4 inch. And then I've got this little stopper on it because this has got this little metal device here to hold the blade. If you don't have it, then this will touch the leather, so just put a little stopper on it. Right, not too much longer to go then, folks. Thank you to everyone who's watching. I'm surprised there's a lot more people watching than I thought we would have, which is really nice. So thank you very much for popping along, saying hi and supporting the channel. There we go, got that needle on. So right, starting on the other side now. So once again, I'm not going to do a back stitch here. This isn't going to be an area of tension or stress, so we're just going to go straight away and get going. So you may have noticed, if you've sort of been a subscriber and supporter of the channel for a while, that things had gone a bit quiet on the old video front this beginning part of the year, and there's a few sort of reasons for that. So the first one being, or the main one really, at the beginning of the year I made a decision that I wanted to do sort of less production work, so less of my orders, so I can focus on doing the videos and doing the tuition, and hopefully soon doing some online tuition sessions as well. And another part of that was I've been doing this for, like I said, almost 13 years now, and it is starting to take its toll on me a little bit in terms of how many orders I'm trying to do in a week. And especially over Christmas. I mean, I know Christmas is a very busy time of year in general, but so I have a few issues. I've got an issue at the moment in my elbow, and I went to see the physio this week, so hopefully the exercises I've got for that are going to help that out. But so anyway, I announced that I would be sort of changing my production sort of levels and the way that I'm working. So after I did that, my orders sort of went through the roof, and I haven't had much in the way of time to make videos, but I have sort of finally broken the back of that now. And so I have got a video, or the next make along tutorial video is pretty much filmed. I think I've got another day on it, so I'm going to be filming that tomorrow. Just finish that off, and then I've got, so what I've filmed so far is all edited together, so hopefully maybe sort of end of this week, if not definitely next week, we'll have the next make along video. And then I'm hoping to get at least 2 videos out to you guys a month after that. So it'll be 1 make along video and then 1 sort of shorter sort of skills or sort of technical based videos. So I'm going to start with doing some tool related videos, because I do get a lot of questions about the tools that I use in my leather work, and because I think some of them are quite different to what some of the other crafters are using. I think coming from my saddlery background, some of the tools that I use, like I say, are a bit different. So I'm thinking about calling it Tool Time, and it's basically going to be like a little mini series, and we'll go over either one specific tool or a few different types of tools or styles of tools in the same sort of group, and we'll go over sort of what ones I have, how to look after them, you know, best techniques for using them and stuff like that. So that's hopefully going to be the second video that we will be, or I'll be putting out soonish. But yeah, if you guys have any suggestions about what you want, I have a list that I have written down here somewhere of suggestions for videos, but if there is like anything that you would like to see, like technique wise or anything like that, if you let me know, I can add that onto my list of video ideas, and then, you know, hopefully I can get onto that and get that made for you guys. So, I mean, also if you have like questions that you are, you know, or sort of projects that you're stuck on, or you want someone to sort of show off your work and get some feedback, you can join our Discord group. So there is a link in the description of this video, and I think earlier on in the chat Tim put it in. And so yeah, so we've got like a little community on there where if you know stuck and you want to ask some questions, we can help. And we are going to sort of, well, there's a section in there where it's show off your work, and what I'm hoping to do with that is, now we've got sort of quite a few new members sort of in the Discord group, to do a sort of video on that where I would pick some of my favourite sort of photos from what you have submitted in there. We'll just go over and talk about them, just to give you guys a bit of publicity, because some of the pictures that have been posted in there so far are so good, some of the work that you guys are doing, and it's great to see. It's great inspiration for me as well to see what other people are making. Ooh, where's the hole? There it is. Best way best way to dye veg tan leather and avoid streaks. So I like to use edge stain for my leather work, and if you're sort of, I like to make my own. So I have got a video where I make my own stain, which we can sort of, if you are interested in that, you can have a look through and find. But yeah, so I use edge stain because that's what I'm used to and what I like. And in terms of getting it like streaking, I'm guessing, is that like on the edges, do you mean? Or I'm not too sure what you mean by that. But if you want to get, like if you're using like a really light coloured leather and you're worried about getting sort of stain on it, then if you're using like a wool dauber, if you trim it down so it's a lot smaller, or if you're really worried, maybe use a cotton bud, and then you're just going to have to take your time and sort of slowly sort of build it up. And that's one thing, I don't really like using light leather because I'd make a mess when I stain, But if you're quick and you do get some of like darker stain on sort of the finished side of your leather, if you're quick you can wipe it off and it should be fine. But you just got to be really, really careful. Oh, down the whole project. Okay, so if you're using like a natural leather, then and you're dyeing it yourself, I mean, I've not really got much experience in this, but you want to make sure. So if you've like wet molded it or anything like that, you need it to be fully dried, because if you've got like anywhere on it that's sort of a bit off or a bit wet still, then that will affect the colour of it. But I mean, like I said, I don't really use that sort of leather. But I know Metropolitan Leather have got their own stains come out, and they've got like an oil-based one, which sort of is meant to help with sort of putting the stain on evenly. But I mean, I'm not really got the experience for that, I'm afraid. So I hope maybe someone else in the chat has more experience with sort of dyeing leather yourself. But yeah, unfortunately that's not something I've really got much experience with at all, I'm afraid. Nearly at a point where we're gonna change threads again. How would you, tripping over my words, how would you recommend making leatherwork a full-time career? Is saddlery training necessary if it's not sort of what you want to do? So I am from a saddlery background, because at the time when I started, that's what I wanted to do. And I would say if that's what you want to do, then yes, go and do your saddlery training. But if saddlery isn't what you want to do, but you want to do leatherwork full time, it's a case of starting small and working up. So I moved up here after my apprenticeship about 7 years ago, and I have worked quite hard to get to where I am now, and it's taken a long time to build up. So if you can do it part-time and build up from there, that would be sort of the best way to do it, rather than if you've got a job already, you don't want to be like pack that in just in case. So I mean, even when I moved up here, I had a little part-time job that I did as a top-up to what I was doing here in the workshop. And I would say that is the best way, start small, build your brand, and get your name out there. That's the hardest bit, is getting people to know you and sort of getting people to find you. And so starting small and working up from there would be sort of the best way to do it. So hopefully that's answered your question. But yeah, so I would start small and work up, because you don't want to, if you've got your job now and you need that, if you've got your mortgage and all that to pay, if you can go down to part-time work to start with, and then sort of slowly do less hours at your other job and more hours at your leatherwork, that is going to be the best way to do it without taking too much of a financial risk on your part. Right, so nearly done on the stitching front, guys. Alright, so I'm just struggling threading this needle. Right, there we go. get in there. Right, so again, I'm not going to start with a back stitch here because there is no area of stress in this bit of the lead. Oh, got my needles all tangled up, there we go. Are you stitching it in lengths? How do you mean? I mean bit by bit, yes. So I find if I stitch with thread that's longer than my arm span, I find it just awkward and a bit faffy. So I like to work in arm spans. So I would just get a double arm span of thread because I know that that's at that, you know, at that size, that's what I can reach comfortably. And because unless you're going to take, I mean, I'm quite short as well, so I'm only I think I'm 5'3", 5'2". So for me to stitch this in one go, I'm going to need so much thread that it's just going to get all tangled up and knotted, and if you were stitching in like a linen thread, it could get a bit fluffy. No matter how much sort of wax you put on, it would probably still go that way. So by stitching in arm's length, I find it's a lot more manageable than trying to stitch this whole thing in one go, because it's just not really very viable. So if you're trying to get started in leatherwork, there are sort of a few different options. Now it does depend where you are, and I can't really give much advice on sort of regional based sort of purchases, but so the minimum you're going to want is a stitching iron and a knife, and then the rest of it sort of isn't that specialist. So like my mallet that I've got here, I just got this from I got it from a hardware stop. It's just a carpenter's, it's a wooden one. And so a lot of the stuff isn't that specialist other than a good knife. If you're stitching or if you're going to be using sort of thinner leather, then you can use like a cheaper sort of Stanley knife, like a pocket knife type thing. Or you can get a rotary knife. So I've not got it on my desk, but the rotary knife that I got was £18, so it's not too bad to start with. But yeah, if you can get like a little craft knife, it's going to be the sort of pricking iron really that you want. I mean, you can get them pretty cheap on eBay. I mean, they might not be the best quality, but if you're just starting out, it's a good place to start. And then sort of the other thing you're going to need, depending on what you're stitching, might be an awl blade and an awl handle. But I mean, to start with, you don't really need too much, and a lot of it you can get from a hardware store. So like my set square, my hammer, my ruler, one of my knives, you know, scissors, stuff like that, you can easily get from just a general hardware store. So I would sort of have a look there, and then just sort of, if you can, sort of have a look and try and get a sort of set of just one sort of pricking iron really, like a 7 or an 8 to get you started, and that's all you really need. The clams. Okay, so yeah, these are what I'm holding my leather in. These are from Abbey, England. So this is a sort of, I think it's a saddler's clam it's sold as on the Abbey England website. So if you just Google Abbey England, they'll come up. And yeah, it's a saddler's clam. So it's basically a giant peg. So you can get different types as well. You can get, I think it's a company called Dream Factory based in South Korea, I want to say. I might be wrong on that, but they do some like desktop clamp, sort of where they clamp onto the desk, sort of clams to hold your leather work that way. But yeah, I mean, I've always used these. Coming from the saddlery side of things, this is what sort of the majority of sort of the saddlers will use. And I find that these work well for me. because they're quite tall and they're very solid, so unless you're stitching something tiny like something 1/2 inch or 5 or 3/8 of an inch, it's going to hold it really well. We're almost at the end of our padding, and so when we get there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of the clams and we're just going to tack the back of our handle in place and then stitch that in, and then we just got a little bit of finishing to do. And like I said, I really don't think Skylar's going to really care about this new lead that she's going to have, but I care. How many awls do you have? So I do have a few. Yeah, so this is the big one that I have. This is what I use for my dog collars and stuff because it's got a nice solid blade on it. I've also got, I've got 2 others. I'm not sure what the other one is. See, I did some tidying earlier to make my room a bit clearer. So this is my bridal awl. It's not in good condition, as you can see. The blade here is bent, and I don't actually use it very much for stitching at all. I just use it, if we were here earlier in the stream, just to line things up when I'm stitch marking. I do have one other awl that I have that I got from a company called Black Mountain Leather Supply, I think it was, based in Wales. And I saw it because I just thought it was quite interesting. So it's got a French blade in it, which is a bit different. So the awl handles that I have here are a diamond blade, and this one's flat, so I thought it would be just something a bit different, quite nice to learn with. Was that the Nikon camera just running out of battery, Tim? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so the main camera's just run out of battery, so I'm just swapping that over. But oh, what was I talking about? Awls. Yeah, so this French one that I got from Black Mountain, I really enjoy it, especially for sort of like the finer leather goods stuff. I find it's really nice. So it depends what you're stitching. If you're stitching mostly sort of with one size of sort of stitch mark, you probably only really need just one awl that fits that size. Yeah, depends what you're doing really. But I find just using this is the one that I use the most, especially for the dog collars and stuff. Right, so hopefully, yeah, the camera will come back on. Wants to make a handbag. Yes, so we have a shoulder bag video out at the moment, but the next video that I'm doing is a tote bag, and I have almost finished making it. So, and that's going to be a make along video where you can buy the patterns. So hopefully your wife likes tote bags as much as I do, which is why we're doing a tote bag, because I wanted one. So I then made the patterns for it and thought it would be a nice little video for you guys to watch as well. So that is coming soon. That's going to be the next video from us. Oh, I could probably do one more stitch actually before I do that. Right, there we go. So what I've done, I've sort of got this to where I want my threads to now cross over back onto the other side. So I've gone through, so you can see here, this is now on the other side. So what we're going to do, I just got to take this out quickly. I just got to put a quick tack or two in here just to hold this in place. Oh, I can use one of these. So we want to make sure this lines up with our marks that we made earlier, because we don't want to have our stitch marks in the wrong place or have it too short. So oh, it helps if you go through both layers of leather, doesn't it? Before you move it. Right, let's hold that there. So you probably could glue this as well, but I think this is just going to be fine for us to just tack through. There we go. We just want it to hold it, so we don't need to put in many. I'm just going to put that one in, and then we'll put this back in the clouds. just going to continue stitching. So by doing it this way, you don't need to do any back stitches here, and you can just continue stitching with the same thread, which is what I'm doing here. So if you need to change your thread though, that's not a problem. What you would do is you would get to the point when you want to stop, do your 1.5 back stitches, and then tack your sort of handle on in place or glue it in place, and then just sort of start stitching again with you would do a back stitch, at least one to start with, because this is going to be, you know, this is going to be held, so we want to get it nice and tight. So yeah, so that's how I stitch all my dog leads. I do it so it's where I get to this end, I don't change my thread at all unless I have to, which I'm hoping I've got enough. It usually works out to be enough, so it's the one benefit of making so many dog leads with the handles the same size. I sort of know that it's going to be in about 4 arms lengths. So I hope you're enjoying this live stream. It's a bit different obviously from my other videos. It's a bit more of an informal chat between us. So, ooh, that's nice. So Tim's just showing me some photos in the show your work off section of our Discord. That I didn't catch the name of the person who submitted, but oh, the screen's gone black too. I can't read that. Okay, but yeah, if you've just submitted some photos into the show your work off, I'm going to have a good look at them later on tonight when we get home. It'll be good to see you guys put your work in there. It's always nice to see what you're making. Right, almost at the home stretch. All that through the right direction would be good. So yeah, do you have a formula for calculating how much thread you need for a run? So it depends on what it is you're stitching and if you want to stitch it all at once or not, really. So I generally work in arm spans, so either a double arm span or a single arm span, and obviously that's going to vary for, you know, different people depending on how tall you are. If you want to get proper technical with it, you can measure out your thread so it's 4 to 5 times the length of the area you want to stitch, which is why when I'm doing the dog collars and stuff, I stitch it in more than one go, because if I'm gonna, you know, it's gonna take me, so this handle here, let's say, this is taking 4 double arms lengths of thread for me. So if I was to stitch the whole thing in that, it's just gonna be such a faff. So yeah, so I work, yeah, arm spans. So especially when you're stitching along long sort of bits, you want to make it so it's not awkward for yourself. Because if you're stitching through sort of thick stuff like this, it's going to be, especially if you're starting out, it's a bit awkward anyway. So to have all that thread as well, it's just going to get in the way. So I've got no problem with sort of swapping my threads out at all. Yes, what I do, your 1.5 back stitches to lock your threads off, and then just start stitching again with your next length. goodness me. It's getting dark in here now. You can't see what I'm doing. There we go. What thread brand do you gravitate to? So we had this a bit earlier on the stream and we've realised that I can't pronounce it. So it depends what I'm making. So this is the box. Oh, if I hold it this way you should be able to see it. I did Google earlier and I had it on my phone to play out how to say it, but it's Pro Atelier ? Plus. And so this is the waxing range that they do. So this is a cabled, so it's like a cord, so it's not flat like tiger thread, wax polyester thread. So they also have they also are sellers of the Maisie superfine linen thread, which is the other thread that I use a lot. So yeah, I really enjoy using these threads. They're so nice, especially these linen threads. They just feel like such good quality. So they are the ones that I am using at the moment, and I use the sort of waxed polyester for the dog collars and leads, because they are going to take a bit of a beating in terms of dogs going swimming and being out in the rain and that sort of stuff. And then for my fine leather goods, so like my wallets and stuff like that, I will use the linen thread, and I wax that with some beeswax myself. I think they do a waxed, hang on, I won't making it up, but I'm not sure if they do a waxed version of their linen thread or not, but I'm quite happy to wax my own thread. How much do you use the bell skiver? I keep finding excuses to use it because it's quite a novelty for me, because I've not had one before. But it depends on what I'm making. So if I'm making wallets, I use it for that, because I like to thin my leather down to sort of just under 1mm thick. If I can get it down to 0.7, that's ideal, or the sort of 0.8 for my wallets. That's what I use it for most, really. I have used it a bit in this tote bag because it's just a bit quicker, more efficient than hand skiving. But obviously if you don't have access to one, then unfortunately you're going to have to hand skive. So if you're making lots of wallets and lots of bags, if you are thinking about getting one, then that would probably be a good investment for you. If that's sort of your main focus of your business is sort of leathercraft, and then it would be worth sort of investing in one, I would say. Kevin, that's really mean. Like honestly, I got it on my phone. I actually googled how to say it, and I was learning, and I just, like I said it, I don't know if you've seen my last video, I forget. My head's like a sieve. And yeah, so I've forgotten how to pronounce it already. I've forgotten pretty much as soon as the stream started, actually, to be honest. So yeah, I'm not good, because I read things how they're written. So if I don't know how to pronounce it, it's not coming out right, that's for sure. Atelier. Yes, thank you. Thank you, DMAC. That's very kind of you. Atelier. There you go, it's French. Thank you for helping. So yes, it's Pro Atelier Plus is where I get my threads from. So super. Right, so we've done stitching this all together nicely, so we're just going to swap. I got to put this GoPro back to a more normal position, so we're just going to swap back to the other camera whilst I do this. And then we have got just a little bit of finishing off to do. Right, let's tidy this up a bit because I made a right mess. And then we'll get Skylar up here and she can show you just how impressed she is with her new lead, because I'm guessing not much. Alright, so Tim's going to help with directing this. Right. Is that right? I can't see. Which way do I need to go? There? This way? There? Yeah? Right. So this is the problem. I can't see what the screen is. So we're having to try and direct it with forwards a bit, back a bit in hand movements. Right. So, anywho, we have our lead. So this is what we're looking like. So we've got to do a few finishing touches to this before we're done. So how do you finish your leather to waterproof? So we're getting on to that. So I said earlier I'd like to do, especially if I'm using a light coloured padding like this grey is here, I like to do a lot of my finishing first, so I don't have to restain all of it. The only bits we're going to be restaining and doing work to for this lead is going to be on these bits where the turns are, just because we want to make that look like sort of one bit of leather if we can. So I've already done my first sort of couple layers of stain, and I put some Tolkanol on the edges. So what I'm just going to do is put a little bit more stain on around these turns, and then I'm actually going to use an acrylic Resolene to actually give it some waterproofing, and we're going to put that on all the way around. So, stain. Move your lead closer to you. Oh, that wasn't the question. Tim's got a whiteboard that he's been writing questions on, and seemingly I would just read them out. So we know from this that I wouldn't make a very good newsreader, because I would just read whatever was on the teleprompter. Right, so just going to put a bit of stain. I'm actually going to get a little paintbrush as well, just so I can go around the top of this turn, because obviously we've made this turn in it. The leather, the stain's just lightened a bit, so we're just going to put a bit more on. We're just going to get the back of that on there, and the same on this one. And now my staining cloth. And so just with the staining cloth, I'm just going to rub that in. I'm going to get a nice finish on this. So depending on your leather and your stain, it can take a few coats to get a nice sort of finish to your leather. And so I'm just going to use this little polishing flicker to get a nice shiny finish. And if you don't have one of these, you can use a bone folder as well. I like to use that a lot of the time as well. And we just want to make, we're just sort of getting friction here, because it's the friction that's going to make the edges all shiny. Where is my workshop? So we're actually in Powys in Wales. So it's actually quite a good location. We're not too far away from civilization, I guess, and so we're quite well situated actually. So if you know the UK or areas of the UK, it's about like an hour and a half from Manchester, about an hour and a half to Birmingham as well. So it's pretty well situated for here, and it's also got, so it's in an old workhouse. So if you've ever seen Oliver Twist, it's like a Victorian workhouse is a poor house, and it's not a very nice place for it to have been, but it's it's quite an old building, and there's lots of other workshops here as well. So I would say I'm here the most, but there are sort of like artists and stuff here as well, like carpentry, There's a gentleman here that makes gypsy wagons, and so yeah, there's quite a few different sort of crafts going on, really. And yes, so with courses, yes, I do courses, but no, I don't do courses at the moment. So we're hoping to get some more guidance soon from the Welsh Government as to when I can start courses up again. And as soon as I can, I will be putting like an email out, and I'll be doing some social media posts. So if you are interested in coming here and doing a course, keep an eye out for that. Or if you want, you can email me on info@JHLeather.co.uk, and I can add you to the course mailing list. So yeah, when I know and I've got some actual solid information, I can let you know as to when the courses are going ahead. And also, I think I mentioned earlier, hoping to start doing some online sort of classes, sort of online sort of one-to-one tuition if you're stuck on stuff, some projects and stuff like that, or if you want to learn something new, or if you just have questions, as a way to, obviously, at the moment we can't really go anywhere here in the UK, but also it will help a lot of you I know aren't based here in the UK or aren't able to come here, so I just sort of open up sort of tuition to more people. If that is something that you are interested in, then once again, if you let me know, just sort of ping me an email and I can put you on sort of the courses list to let you know as and when they go live. Ah, good choice, Kevin. What ones did you get? I do like the Metropolitan hides, and they're always so helpful, the guys and the ladies at Metropolitan Leather. Yes, I like my jumper. My mum got it for me for my birthday. My mum and my stepdad got it, so she was on the phone to me and I was just going on about stitching, and she actually said that on the phone. So it was actually quite a surprise when they sent it to me. I wasn't expecting it, but it's quite nice, isn't it? So maybe we should do some merchandise. I've got a couple of ideas. I've been learning how to use Illustrator a lot, so I'm hoping that I can sort of add a couple of maybe t-shirts or something to the store, maybe at a later date. So you keep your eyes open for that. It is something that I want to do, because at the moment I think I've got about 3 jumpers that I wear down here, and that's about it. So that's why in my t-shirts in my videos you'll see that I'm just like wearing the same thing, but that's because and that is because I am wearing the same thing, because I don't have many workshop clothes. Right, so what I've done my restaining around my buckle turn and where my handle joins the collar. So what I'm actually using, it's not vanilla pods, it is Phoebings. Let me get the big bottle. We're using acrylic Resolene, so because it's in a big bottle like this I find it a bit awkward to use, so I just put it in a more accessible pot. And so especially with the collars, because fur can it rubs, especially when it's wet, we want to add a bit of protection to it. So this is what I do. So once I've done my polishing and my staining and my finishing touches to it, I will then go on and put some acrylic Resolene on. So we're just going to put some of this on, and this is going to soak in, so we can do a couple of coats, and basically when it stops soaking in, that will be like the last coat that I'll do, if that makes sense, because you can see, or I can see, that is soaking into the leather quite fast, so we'll just put a couple coats on there, go over it a couple times, and then hopefully it won't take too long to dry and we can do our creasing. Normally I would do the creasing first, but I got a bit ahead of myself, I think, with my talking. So I've committed to this bit now, so we're going to do this first and then we'll re-crease it afterwards. But usually I would crease it after I've stained it, and then the acrylic Resolene is the very last thing to go on, because then I can leave it to dry for a bit. So I like to put this on with a paintbrush, especially when we get to the padding bit, because it's a bit easier to control the paintbrush than it is one of those big wall daubers. And if you do use acrylic Resolene, you want to make sure you wash your paintbrush afterwards, because else your paintbrush will dry like rock solid. So it's going to go up around the handle. It's not too bad with this because it's, there we go. And so I generally put this acrylic Resolene on the edges of the majority of my leather work, just out of habit really, but especially on the leads and the dog collars and on the belts, because I'm quite paranoid. I don't think it would do, but if it did rub, like, and you got a posh pair of trousers and you then got black stain over them, I don't think that's going to go down well. So just as a precaution, I do this. What colour blue is that? So if you're on the Metropolitan website, that's where I got it from. This is their mid blue, and like I said earlier in the video, if you want a bridal butt for Metropolitan Leather, that is a coloured hide. If you email them, I think it's £30 to £35 extra on top of the bridal butt to have it custom coloured. But this is, yeah, this is the blue from the Lamport range because I liked it. So I basically, yeah, when I ordered it, I rang them up or I emailed them, I don't remember, one way or the other. I contacted them to say that I wanted it in the mid blue. I find the dark blue is way too dark for my liking. But if you want samples and stuff of some of the colours they do, just send them an email. They're pretty good, and you'll be able to hopefully get one to your liking. Right, so let's put some of this on this side. Yeah, nearly there, guys. So if you've been watching from the start of the stream, thank you very much. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. Thanks for sticking with me. And yeah, this video is going to be available sort of to watch back if you are interested in watching the whole thing back at a later date. Yeah, I'm getting there. So I'm quite pleased with how it's gone. I was a bit worried this morning and just a bit nervous because I'm not used to actually speaking whilst I'm doing the videos. You'll notice that I do voiceovers instead because I find that easier for me to do, because I stumble over my words too much. So I think it's gone all right. Right, so just do this around the handle and we can get it creased, and then we can look at the upset face of Skylar as she realises she's got a lead and not some food when I present it to her. What length handle is the lead versus the lead length? So I like to do my handles so they're 8 inches, and so that's 8 inches here to like the end of it. So the actual opening of the handle will have like a 16-inch diameter, but it's about 8 inches long, because I find that that works well for most people's hands. But it depends on, like, obviously the length of the lead really. If you've got a really, really short lead, you could work it into a handle. So if you had like, if this was going to be like a 10-inch lead or something, you would just have it so it's just a handle really, and you'd have it so you'd work your turn in to sort of the end of it where the handle would attach to the rest of the lead normally anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about sort of balancing it out, because I mean the handle's got to be the size that it needs to be to fit most people. So like I said, mine I do 8 inches long because I find that works well for the majority of people, both men and women. I'm aware I've got tiny hands, so although this is a bit big for me and I hold my lead here anyway, if you do sort of happen to put your hand through it and do it that way, then yeah, then that's that. Right, so isn't it actually cost per colour? Oh, that's a good question. I'm not too sure. I've only ever ordered one coloured hide from them at a time, to be honest. I mean, I would email them. That's the best thing. Like I said, they're pretty good on the old emails. And ask. Right, so just gotta wait a minute or two for that just to dry. So just a quick bit of tidying it. Right, so that's doing all right. Super. Right, so got a bit of it on there, so we'll just wipe that off. If you get any excess acrylic resin on, just wipe it off with a bit of tissue, and that's all it needs really. Super. So what I'm going to do is just turn this on. What do I do with my greaser? There it is. So normally I would do my recreasing first, but I got a bit carried away with my stitching and with my sort of staining and doing the acrylic resin. So I'm doing it this way around, but normally I would do sort of my finish sort of polishing and then crease it and then put the resin on. And that's the way I usually do things, because then I can leave it to dry fully. But this is actually dried quite fast actually, so it's going to be fine. So the noise you can hear is my crease heater warming up. It's just a cheap portable hob that I got on eBay, I think for about 15, maybe £20. And so that's what I use for heating my crease up. And then sort of just to make sure that it's not too hot, I have a bit of scrap here that I will use just to test out the sort of heat of it. I mean, it's not a very scientific method that I have here. It's put it on for a bit and see if it's hot. If it's too hot, let it cool, and if it's not hot enough, put it back on. So that feels alright. So do a bit of a test, make sure that it's not too hot, and then so the bits that you need to focus on are going to be around this turn area on the lead. So if you move the trigger clip out of the way, you can then go around there. Whoops, getting caught up. On that side. And so the recreasing is just sort of that bit that's going to set your leather work out from the rest, because it just gives such a good sort of finish to it. And sort of where you're stitching, when you sort of do the stitching part of it, it can sort of, because the leather is moving, it can sort of become less prominent from your original crease line. So by just going over it again, it's just going to sort of show it off a bit more. So the areas to focus on are around this turn area and here where the handle joins, but we're going to recrease the whole lot just because we can. And again, just testing, making sure it's not too hot, and then we can just crease the rest of this. And it doesn't matter if you push your crease away from you or pull it towards you. You just want to put even pressure on it to get a nice crease line, and this is, you know, this is just decorative. If you don't want to put this on, you don't have to, but I find it just gives it that nice finish that you don't get on like shop bought stuff. And I have my creaser here set to about 1/16 of an inch, which I think off the top of my head is about two question mark millimeters. Do you go over your stitches? No. So the way that I stitch mark, I have, so my creasing iron is set to 1/16 of an inch, and then my stitching line is set at 1/8 of an inch. So you can set them a bit closer, but I find that I like what this looks like because the two lines are sort of equidistant apart. Alright, just do this bit and then we can get Grumpy herself. Oh, you make it look easy, thank you. Yeah, so I've been doing this for nearly 13 years. It will be in September was when I started my training. But there we go. Here is our finished lead. If you could swap back to the main camera, please, Timothy. And we'll get some bribes for Skylar, I think, as well. So yeah, here's the finished lead. So we got, looking quite sweet, that. So, gosh, I'll make her a matching collar, is going to be the next thing. But right, we'll get some encouragement. So she's under my desk at the moment. I'm sure she'll come out because she's not had her dinner and she usually has it at about 5:30. Hey you coming up? What's this? She's gone all shy now. You gonna come out? Come on. Come here. Come on. Come on, puppy. Oh, I'll get ya. I'm gonna get ya. Here she is. Hey, Grumps. There you go. You sit there. There we go. So yeah, she's going to be 8 this year, which is hard to believe. And she's a Springer Spaniel cross Cocker Spaniel. So she's like in between sizes, aren't you? But you're 100% bonkers. What do you think, Skylar? This is for you. Are you pleased? Oh, thank you. So yeah. So, like I said, thank you very much for watching this live stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. And maybe we'll do some more in the future. So, from Skylar and me, it's goodbye. I just want to say a huge thank you for Tim, who's helped me with the cameras today and sort of feeding me all your questions. You had enough? You go in. Okay. Goodbye, Skylar. But yeah, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all again soon. Bye.